Welcome to the Old Ways for the New Age podcast, where we weave the threads of traditional living into the tapestry of modern day life. I'm Hannah Forrest, a herbalist and naturopath with a deep love for plants, seasons, and the quiet rituals that shape how we live and care for ourselves. This podcast is an invitation to slow down and reconnect with the wisdom of the natural world through herbal medicine, folklore, seasonal living, ritual, astrology, and simple earth-honoring practices that can be gently folded into everyday life. I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive in. I wish to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and record, the Wonjarabara people. I honour their enduring connection to the lands, waters, and communities, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. I also extend this respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Hey everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode. I am bringing you another Kitchen Table Chats episode this week, and I'm speaking with Abby Smissen. Abby is a postpartum doula. She is a mother to 3 beautiful wildlings. She is a writer, weaver of words, really. She is a maker of beautiful herbal wares. She is also just a witness to motherhood, and as you'll hear in the episode, she's a bit of a folklorist as well, which I love. But I really so appreciate Abby's willingness to share all the real and raw parts of motherhood in a way that's also very beautiful and grounded and achievable and just something that is realistic and that I think a lot of us can identify with. We talk all about discovering the wheel of the year and integrating it into your life in the Southern Hemisphere. Abby grew up in England, and, as some of you may know, my husband is Canadian, so both of us have had to walk this path of integrating what we know about the wheel of the year and seasonal living from a Northern Hemisphere perspective and bring that into something that makes sense for us in the Southern Hemisphere. This is probably one of the biggest questions I get from people around the wheel of the year is I just don't understand how to make it relevant to my life in Australia or New Zealand. And so, as we touch on in the episode, a lot of that comes back to a seasonal observational practice. And I harp on about that all the time, but it's really the truth. And so I hope that you enjoy this beautiful episode, and I just really appreciate Abby's time. And if you're watching, we also hold up a lot of show and tell. So I'll link the books that I can remember in the show notes, and of course share all of Abby's details so that you can go and enjoy her work as well. Welcome back to this week's episode of Always a New Age podcast. And this week we have a very exciting episode for you that is our second ever kitchen table chat episode. So these were designed to be a little bit more casual and a bit more of a way for you guys to connect with me and with my guests in a fun, kind of unstructured way. So this week I'm chatting with Abby Smissen. And so welcome, Abby. Second time to the podcast, first time with me. I met you when you were up here living on the mountain, and you used to come into an old workplace of mine. And, I absolutely love the way that you show up online. I think there's so many people who resonate with what you put out on your Instagram. You do beautiful captions. Your writing is lovely. And, you really do capture not only motherhood and kind of everyday life in a really, I don't even like the word romanticize, but like really earthed, like grounded, but beautiful way. You sink into the moments and you capture really beautiful things from your, your everyday life that I think really makes people feel like they can also have beauty within their mundane, so to speak. And so, you talk a lot about the wheel of the year, and that's what we're here to actually talk about today. But could you tell us a little bit about your journey, because you are English, in case nobody can hear, coming from the Northern Hemisphere and then moving to the Southern, and what that's felt like just, with your living and your dynamic.
Yeah, it's been interesting for sure. And a bit of a journey to find our way in it all. And so, I grew up in England, very much like in the country, in the south, As you can probably tell from my accent, I do not have much of like any other very neutral English accent. And so I guess, like, yes, I've always been like in and around what's like this, you know, the seasons, and obviously they're much more pronounced where I'm from than opposed to southeast Queensland where we are now. But it was really like motherhood that kind of like awoke me to what was happening in the world around us. I guess I had like quite what I call quite a difficult like birth and beginning to motherhood. It definitely wasn't like simple. And so I was kind of bound to home for like the first 6 weeks for sure. Yes, as a doula now, like should have been resting and all the things, but like very much like at home with the pram. My daughter was born like right at the end of August. So we were just heading into autumn. But we literally went from moving. Essentially, we had a situation when my daughter was born in which we lost our rental right at the end of my pregnancy. And so I literally went into hospital living in one house and left 3 days later living in the new house, which was just a wild thing to go through postpartum. Wow. But the benefit of that was that we moved like right to the edge of a country park. And so we were like immersed in nature. Like it was right on our doorstep, this beautiful little country park. We'd go around and we go and feed the ducks and all those things. And so like that was like a real like immersion into what was, and that kind of like point of nature would become something we'd return to again and again and again. Like we could just literally open our door and just like walk out and walk around this park, and it much as like you'd do like a sit spot, it was like our nature spot where we'd watch the seasons unfurl and everything change, which was so beautiful. And yeah, just like really connected like through my daughter and showing her the natural world and kind of seeing it through her eyes. It really like awoke me into the seasons and what was going, like, you know, in a way that I think when you're very like selfish and insular as like a maiden, I just didn't have that awareness before. And so yeah, just through her really became like immersed, and then got introduced into Steiner and all those beautiful pedagogies. I had some awareness of that because I used to work in childcare, but I hadn't really thought fully into those things because I wasn't working in a Steiner and all those kinds of things. But all those pedagogies, obviously very nature-based, rhythm-based, all of those things. And yeah, it was kind of like this journey into that. And then you begin honouring the seasons and then moving through that wheel of the year. And then we ended up here when my daughter was 2, and that was just like a completely, everything flipped as like, you know, and it's very hard to accustom yourself with what's going on because so much of our culture, even here, is still very Northern Hemisphere focused. And so having to like learn ground and refigure what that meant has been like a huge undertaking, really, and has definitely been my biggest point of homesickness, that's for sure. But yeah, that was kind of like how we got here to where we are today, and how we've like, yeah, the journey, I guess.
Yeah. And I think we've had, you know, I think we have like similarities in that, you know, my husband is Canadian, and so he grew up with the Northern Hemisphere holidays and the weather, and I know that that's been a difficult transition for him in some ways too, because he doesn't really feel like Christmas is Christmas, if that makes sense, because it's not really. And so it's just interesting, you know, over kind of my journey, I've had to figure out how to kind of honor both, and people used to find that really confusing. It's also confusing for us. Yeah. I think I could say for both of us that it's complex, it's kind of tricky. And as you said, like the culture, we have all the commercial holidays that were, look, take this how you want, but like inspired by kind of pagan holidays. And so like a lot of them do have pagan roots. I know people debate that, but you know, from my understanding, a lot of them do. And so, you know, you have Christmas and Easter and all of these holidays, you know, Halloween, that kind of are fun to celebrate, and everybody else in the world is kind of celebrating that, and it looks so fun. And then over here the weather is just different, and so if you're wanting to honor a seasonal path, you kind of have to navigate how to merge the two in a way that makes sense. And so, you know, I used to have an altar, like my altar used to be part Northern Hemisphere, part Southern Hemisphere, to try to make it work for both of us. But these days we do tend to focus on the Southern Hemisphere, and we just keep the commercial holidays as commercial holidays. But the one exception is probably Christmas, and so I do want to talk about that because you do Christmas really well, and you've started with some of your pals doing Solstice, which is so fun. So do you want to talk about Solstice?
Yeah, so I guess that was like the biggest thing moving here, is like Christmas just doesn't feel like Christmas. Even like the decorations that we still have them and we still put them up because they're very sentimental, but like even the decorations that we have just don't translate right. There's red and there's gold and there's green, and it's like all very wintry, like the big like pine or fir tree that you put in the house, like it just doesn't make sense. But in saying that, I'm a big believer that, like, as you're saying, like with the commercial holidays, because we're so Northern Hemisphere focused, if you don't do them, you miss out on them, right? Like, if we didn't, you know, do like a little...
And with family too, like that's...
Yeah.
A dynamic too with your extended family.
Yeah, but even things like Halloween, like if kids like watch all the other kids trick-or-treating down our street, I'm not gonna be like, oh sorry, it's not the right time of year, kids, because they won't get to do that. Otherwise they're not going to be able to trick-or-treat, because at Samhain, like, no one's doing that, right? And so
yeah.
For me, Christmas felt very much like that. Like, how do we kind of hold those dualities of what's going on around us in terms of like community, and I don't like my little woo friends, but like the actual community that's happening around us, versus like what's happening around us in like terms of like nature and where we are in the wheel of the year and all those things. And so it's definitely like still a work in progress in terms of like how we hold those, but for us that looks like just kind of nudging a little bit towards more of like the midsummer stuff, looking towards like, you know, it's the longest day, we'll have like a big, you know, but the past maybe 3 years we've held like a little, what we call like a solstice party, and so everyone comes together, and yeah, it's Christmassy, and we do have like Christmas songs on and all those things, but like we do little summer solstice sort of rituals and all those kinds of things, so especially like the kids can really like ground themselves in what's happening, not just among like with Christmas and all those things, but like what's actually happening right now. The biggest one I found is just simply like looking around to what's going on around you in nature and bringing that into your house. So like going and creating like I've created like a little solstice tradition. So we have in our corner of our house our Christmas tree. Then we have like some sort of midsummer offering. And so like I've done like garlands before, usually of mugwort, just because it grows in absolute wild abundance in the garden. So yeah, some sort of solstice offering. So we've done like garlands full of mugwort, and then we've also did like last year, instead of doing that because I just didn't have the space, I did like a big like sort of hanging wreath. And then we just really focus all our crafts that we hang on those as like summer crafts, and like, you know, hang loads of suns from it, and then we get like loads of flowers, whatever it is, and then like that becomes the source of our crafting. So we kind of hold our Christmas crafts here, and we do all those sort of like things that are a bit Yule-y, and then I also made sure to save a lot of those to transfer this year. So instead of you know, when you're on Pinterest or whatever, I'd make sure I'd save those for Yule, and just so that I still had them to remember them for when, you know, Yule just passed in June, so they didn't get forgotten. But yeah, we hold that with all our Christmas things, and then on the other end of the spectrum we have in the corner, like in the what I call like in the main area of the house, the big midsummery things. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I do the same thing with saving ideas. I think people get weird and confused about, I find this even with clothing. People will never buy stuff out of season. I buy stuff out of season all the time
Yeah.
because the season is always coming back. So to me, that makes total sense, and I don't mind waiting. If I find something for a really good price, I'm not going to not, keep it for winter, because winter's going to come back. And so I do the same. Like, I have, you know, different folders on Pinterest or on Instagram, and I'll save crafts because, of course, you definitely don't want to lose them. And there's so many good ones around this season that translate to Yule and kind of your more winter solstice, aligned themes. And so you can just save them and do that. And I like that. I feel like with kind of Christmas, I I do love Christmas. So Christmas is, I think because I had so many fond memories growing up of my mum making things super festive and getting super involved with it, probably more than most, because she was an early years teacher for 35 years. And
Yeah.
so she really loves, and my parents are just so extra anyway. Like, they just can't help themselves. They just go the extra mile. And so, like, I remember making the rumbles, and you do the tree decorating. It'd be a whole thing. And, we would do different crafts and watch the movies. And it was just really festive and fun. And so I've definitely grown up with a love and appreciation for mostly Christmas, but to a lesser extent, Halloween and Easter. And so, like, I definitely probably bring a bit more of the commercial kind of Christmas vibe into, like, Christmas time, like end of the year, winter, like summer solstice time, because I just love the festivity. But definitely in terms of crafts and stuff like that, I tend to do more summer solstice focused crafts, drinks, food. Um, Sometimes, like, we'll bring the food in even at Christmas. Like, I know one year I was doing like elderflower cordial with like chamomile ice cubes and like that kind of thing, which probably isn't super Christmas, but is kind of, more herbal and kind of solsticey. So I think, there's really no hard and fast rules, and that's kind of the fun of it. You can make it exactly what works for you, and it takes years to figure out maybe what that is, and it's an ever evolving practice. And especially when you have kids, as it adds different elements and dimensions to your practice, because you're not just doing something that makes sense and is fun for you, but you're doing something that everybody can kind of enjoy and interact with to some extent. But do you have any particular kind of resources that you like to use to help you figure out crafts, or, learning for the kids if they're kind of, because they're also homeschooled, if you're doing any learning around the solstice? Is there any book or, tool that you enjoy doing with them or using with them?
Yes. I mean, we are a book household. We're like full of books. I think the more that I've bought some here to show, but the more I've kind of like got in relation with it, the more I've kind of I have them and I love them and I look at them every now and again. But I feel like you can get quite what's the word, like formulaic sometimes, and I find that there's no, like, as you were saying, there's like no right way to do things, right? And so I found for like a while ago, a couple of years ago, really, especially after I had my third, like, I'd be like looking like, oh, what should I put on my altar, and and all these things. And I think it's really nice to kind of steer you that way. But like, I got a bit too like obsessed with it and being like the most like, what's the word, like, like the most
Aesthetic, like, perfect.
aesthetic, all those kinds of things. And it's just not, and it's just definitely not with kids, right? Like, I always remember, trying to get my third child's placenta ready to bury, and my husband's like not super into this stuff as it is anyway, and so he's kind of like bit just so he could help, you know, with the kids. And like, it was absolute chaos. Like, it was beautiful and it was lovely. It was so special because of it, but like, it was not in any way like had I imagined it in my head. Like, it was just absolute chaos. Like, you know, I'm trying to put like herbs on it to like, you know, and then the kids like chucking stuff on it, and then like, you know, and so I loved it for that because it was so real. But had I like been like hung up on what it should have been like or whatever, I would have been so disappointed. So I have learned to kind of like kind of unburden myself a little bit of like the should and the shouldn't. And the more you lean into it, I think the more like you do know what to do, and you know kind of intuitively like what, like, you know, what should be done. And I love that about like, you know, kind of walking this path as opposed to any other. Like, you know, I was just reading like the other day, if you look at like the Cailleach, she means one thing entirely in like Irish mythology, in that she's like this really stern bringer of winter and like a big scary kind of thing, where in Scotland like she's much gentler and all those kinds of things. But if you kind of there's no like real right way to even view this person who, you know, who's supposed to be this thing, whatever. Like, I don't know, how do you feel about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I talk a lot, like every single episode, you'll hear it. It's like, take a shot every time I say, you know, observational practice. But I talk a lot about observational practice. A shot of elderberry syrup, guys, elderberry syrup. So, yeah, like, I talk about observational practice a lot. And so I have like a stack of books here because I just thought, why not? But this one is one that I literally use all the time. It's interesting because Frances has quite a strict Wiccan, I think it's Wiccan, approach in her other books, but this one I feel like it doesn't carry over so much. And this was the first of hers that I'd read. And I still think it's great for Southern Hemisphere stuff. Have you heard of it, Dancing the Sacred Wheel?
I think you recommended it to me a while ago, but I haven't got it yet.
Yeah, so she talks about ritual experiences, and she talks about like the dance of the god and goddess and like the Oak and Holly King story and that kind of thing. But she's Southern Hemisphere, and she ties it all back to Southern Hemisphere. And she will talk about each Sabbath, and she'll talk about kind of, you know, the standard, here's a bit of mythology, or here's a quote, or, you know, this is the energy that's manifesting, but talking also about the Indigenous peoples and, you know, their practices and how animals migrate in Australia around each time of the year and that kind of thing. So I quite like that because not because I dogmatically follow it, but because it was the first book I'd really found that kind of dived a little deeper in terms of actually acknowledging and witnessing what was happening around us in nature.
Yeah.
And directly tied that back. And that's regardless of whether it was Southern or Northern. A lot of the times they don't talk about animal migratory patterns. So I feel like that was cool and different, and I liked that. And then, you know, like there's a few that I really like, but I always first do the observational practice. So like go for nature walks, and you know, ever since Finn was born, I've talked to him. We walk under these maple trees, and I'm like, look at the color of the leaves. Like, look, they're green now, and then oh, look, now they're orange, and then they've fallen off. Now they're brown. They've fallen off, and we collect them and we bring them inside. And I don't know about you guys. We don't have a proper table yet. It's kind of on a bench seat, but like a nature table, kind of kids alter nature table situation where we can bring in, like, I pick some of his toys that are more seasonal appropriate, like little wooden mushrooms for fall and like autumn, and then we'll add a pine cone and a maple leaf, and we'll put the red or orange play silk underneath and kind of make it appropriate for the season. So the main thing I like about books is I do like the crafts. I like the craft and celebration ideas, because sometimes, I mean, the online viral ones are great. Like, they're really cute too. But we didn't always have that. Like, that's kind of new. And I've been doing this even like for a long time, my whole life, pretty much, my whole adult life. So, you know, when I started with paganism and witchcraft, there was not online stuff like there is now. There was like old forums and, you know, that kind of stuff. And so I used to get these, which is the Sabbath's Almanac by Llewellyn, and they do one every year. And so every year there are different crafts and different foods, and I always felt like that was a nice resource. And so it's Northern Hemisphere, but I would just like apply it to Southern, like my seasons.
Yeah.
And so, like, you know, one year there was the corn dollies, and then, you know, there's a Tree of Life candle spell here, and they write a little bit about them and how to do them. So, you know, I use books for that purpose. Witchy Magic, that's the Southern Hemisphere book. And then recently, because you're 3 kids in, so that's different for you guys too, again, because you've got a bigger family and more bodies to wrangle and, you know, personalities involved. But I obviously just have the one, and so I'm kind of new to doing this stuff in a parenting sphere. And so I got Circle Round, which I don't know if you've heard of that one. You probably have. And then I know for a fact you have this one, which is the Wheel of the Year, like Fiona Cook and Jessica Rue. I mean, we don't get to use this one very much yet because he's so young, so he doesn't really understand. There you go. But it is visually beautiful, which I really like, because I think regardless of whether you take the info, just being able to look at the pictures is really nice and gives you the feeling of the season. But yeah, I mean, I think observational practice is the first place to start. It's also very approachable. Everyone can do it. It doesn't cost you anything. And so I completely agree with you in that respect. I think starting there and then the research and things can come later, and you can weave it in as it makes sense for you.
Totally. But I do think in saying that, books have such a great place, because for like many people, especially like if you've been in this country for, you know, your parents were born here, and, you know, for a long time, you kind of have like a disconnection potentially from, well, you have more of a connection to what's going on here, which is great, but in terms of like paganism and those sort of sabbats and all those things, and what that means in connection to where we are, because, you know, obviously we're talking about going a bit backwards with Christmas and all of those things, like they can also like really, and I'm not saying, by the way, that I'm like, oh, I'm English, I know, I did not grow up in these traditions like at all, so it's also been like a huge learning for me. And so just to be able to like have those references of, you know, what is Imbolc? What does that mean? Like, it's not exactly like it's in the common vernacular, right? Is so helpful. Like, as you're to kind of like really ground yourself in what is and where am I? And like, as you said, like, this is such a beautiful one just because it's laid out so beautifully, and you can really like you can just flick to where you are and like, you know, have a look and what's going on. The other one I love is the Children's Forest. Have you heard of that one, Hannah?
But yes, I think I have, but I do not own it yet.
Beautiful, and it's just got such beautiful craft. Again, it's quite Northern Hemisphere, you know, it's talking about like willow weaving and all those things that just don't exist, but like there are some really beautiful stuff. There is some really beautiful stuff in here as well that, you know, you can translate. But what I love about this one is that it also includes at the start of each sort of Sabbat, it's divided into the Sabbats, there's always like a really beautiful story or like a folk tale. And they're always so good. And this whoever this author is, Dawn Casey, we also have some of her folktale books, and they're just like, the way that she writes folktales for kids is just so beautiful. She doesn't dumb them down. She doesn't like she still uses that like beautiful like lyrical language that you associate with folktales and that. So I love her. We have and then that's the other thing as well. We just read a lot of seasonal tales, and I think that just really like connects us to where we are and what we're doing. And so I have like so many folktale books, like kid ones, but also just adult ones, and we always have them like, especially around this time of year. I feel like when, you know, as we hunker down whatever, we always get them out and put them on the dining table, because it just feels so nice just to have those stories around us ready to reach for, like, whenever. The one that was like my first, like, real introduction to seasonal living was the Meadow Sweet Year, and so it's like very Steinery, and it's like, you know, like nature tables and stuff, but it just also has it's really beautiful, and it's basically like 1 year in a Rudolph Steiner, like, parent-child sessions, and so there's just some really stuff in there, and like, again, like, obviously the biggest issue is you get to winter and it's all very Christmassy, but like, you figure it out, hey. But and it's just got loads of crafts and all that, and it's very like early years appropriate, because it's like a parent-child playgroup one, which I love. And then my absolute favorite author in terms of like adult, like trying to delve into, you know, what we are and where we are and all those things, is Glennie Kindred. She's my absolute favorite. I just love the way she writes. I just love her books. They just feel so earthy and so beautiful, and like, I love the illustrations. And so this was really like, I can't remember when I got this. This was the first one I got, and I can't remember when. It was like one of those moments that, like, you should have had that book at that moment, you know, and it really like dove into it all. So I really, really like her, and I also just love I love the way that she, because for me this is like at the heart of it all, right? She's like I just love the way everything connects back to like peace on the earth, and like, you know, walking with like relationship to the earth and gently, and all those things that really is like at the heart to me of why I raise my children like in these traditions. Like, if it's not coming back to that at the heart, like in peace for all people and all those things, like, there's no point in doing it. I don't know what you feel like.
No, I really like that. I haven't heard of Glennie Kindred, and I hadn't heard of the Meadow Sweet Year. Was it the Meadow Sweet Year?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm definitely gonna look those up, and I always try to put what we talk about in the show notes, so I'll try to link all the books that we've talked about so people can go and like see what see it for themselves and find them. But I will definitely have to get my hands on them. And I mean, I think you bring up two really good points. One point I want to drive home is, you didn't explicitly say this, but you were, you know, touching on it, is that people, one of the biggest things people get confused about is just how, like, wrapping their minds around like how to translate it to Southern Hemisphere. But it's actually not that complicated. I think it's the same thing as saving your crafts into folders to use later. You also can just use books, and whilst not everything will translate, or like blog posts or whatever it is, not everything will translate, because there's some plants that we don't have, especially in Queensland. Like, you know, there's just some plants we're not going to have grow here. But you can just flip it and use it. So just ignore the dates and just use the seasonal stuff as per your season. And it's really as simple as that. But which is why having an observational practice is so helpful, because then you can go, okay, cool. Well, we're looking at autumn, we're looking at leaves, and, you know, you can find that in a book and resonate with parts of it. Though also Queensland has quite a different like sense of biodiversity, that, you know, the bioregion in Melbourne, like in Victoria, is totally different. And I think they do have willows. So, you know, like, that's the thing too. Australia is so diverse, and we have so many different, biospheres, so to speak. Like, you know, the ecology of that environment is so different. Like Tasmania, totally different. You're going to get like hawthorn grows down south, does not grow up here. You're just not going to find a hawthorn bush, I'm pretty certain, up here. I've tried. So I think, you know, Australia's tricky in that regard as well. But the thing about culture loss, like, I think is a real thing. That disconnection, having grown up here, having my parents have been born here, my grandparents were born here, but their parents weren't. They were Irish. So I think, and then English on the other side. And so, you know, there's a few generations removed, and the tradition does get lost. And that is tricky because you're kind of building something completely from scratch in a sense. And like my family, we weren't raised with religion at all. So I didn't have anything that I was kind of, I guess, moving from. I started studying paganism when I was 15. And so that's pretty like young compared to some people that I know. But also I wasn't born with it. It's something I had to discover. And again, when I was younger, there just wasn't really resources the same way that there are now. And I was talking with a friend the other day. I dabbled with a coven when I was 18, and they were all adults. And I was like the only young person. And like, that's just because I walked into a metaphysical store and was like, hey, how can I connect with some people that are like-minded in this way? But there really was such little exposure to any of that. And there was just no one in school who was doing the same thing as me or interested in the same topics. And no one around me who had any of these traditions, and I think you're right, having come from England, I do think it's still very much a part of the culture there. Like, there are seasonal markets, and like even the way like food is quite seasonal, I think, if you would, you tell me. But here kind of stuff grows all year round. So it's not like, like you can get a tomato all year round that was grown in Australia, and that's just, it is what it is, because you can grow stuff in cans and it's pretty warm all year. So I think it is different. And so having to build from the ground up, I do think, yeah, books for sure have their place. But again, the seasonal practice, it comes back to like your observational practice and just getting in touch with what's happening outside your window. And, there's people doing really great work too. So I've had Jen Campus on here a few times. Don't know if you know Jen's work, but she's fantastic. So she's doing a lot of work around, basically reclaiming your heritage and your lineage, and like traditions that your ancestors had with a broken line. So let's say, like me, I don't have traditions that have been passed down through my family line. So that's something that I have to build for myself. And so, her whole thing is, there's not, just because you don't have like this unbroken line of tradition through your family, and you don't have a very strong connection or like technical understanding of who your ancestors were, and, where they lived, and, what the family tree looks like, you can still have a relationship with that without it being inappropriate in any way. So she's about teaching people how you can start to develop those practices in a really respectful way that, makes sense for you as an individual. And that part of that comes from her being adopted and not having necessarily a ton of information about her ancestors. And so that's like a dynamic also that a lot of people don't ever talk about in spiritual settings, I think, and teachings online, where people talking about, well, if you're adopted, what does tradition look like for you? So that's interesting as well. But yeah, I think, some of my favorite ways to celebrate other than nature walks, I really love feasts. I love food, as you know. And so I think that's really nice. And you can do then like focus on the seasonal foods around you. So we don't have to just focus on, though my husband does always request a roast dinner, no matter really what Sabbath it is. He always wants a roast dinner because for him that just feels special. Yeah. That's like what he associates with a celebration, like of a Sabbath. That's just his thing. And then usually if I'm baking something, I make that seasonal. So soul cakes for Samhain, those kinds of things. Bread for Lamas, Lunasa. So we like to do the food thing, and sometimes we'll watch movies that are seasonally appropriate. And then I also love, like, I have a couple of these decks, which I think it'd be really fun to do with kids as well, if you're cool with that. And so like my friend gave me these. These are the Seasons of the Witch Oracle. And so I don't know if you probably have seen these. She did the whole wheel, well, she's working her way through the whole wheel of the year. So that's kind of cool. But you can, I like pulling out the cards to celebrate. And if I can pick like a seasonally appropriate deck, I will do that. I have a few. So that's something I like to do with Finn as well, and he loves to pick a card.
Yeah, we are a big fan of oracle
cards. Do you guys have any like kind of, do your kids use them as well?
Yeah, my daughter has a couple, like very, very like gentle like, you know, fairies and stuff, that kind of stuff. But in terms of like what we do, I found that personally it feels like a spiral in terms of obviously we follow the spiral in terms of, you know, coming in and out in winter and summer, but I mean like in terms of like when you begin these things with your children, especially, it very much feels like a spiraling over the years of like the layering of the traditions and the rituals and the things you do. So like obviously I remember like for my daughter's birthday, for example, it was like the first year, you know, we bought the ring and we had one candle and we had two little things, and then, you know, the next year we'd add something else, and then we started the crowns and all those things. And it's the same with like all the Sabbats. Like we only really started really fully honouring Yule properly like last year. We always like kind of acknowledge the solstice and the passing of the longest night, but in terms of like the actual what feels like Christmas for me, in terms of like that wintry lighting up the longest night with all the candles and having some food and all those things, we only started last year, and we did like a little bit of a feast with our friends, and we did it again this year, but it didn't happen till like last weekend because of sickness and all those things. But like the first year, like I baked a Yule log. So now every year I bake this Yule log, and it's just like really special that now like even after 1 year, my daughter's like, oh, you're going to bake that Yule log again. And then this year they did a physical Yule log, and then we added that. And so I'm sure that like next year we'll add that. And like, it's just like that layering over time of all these little things that become traditions. And that's always like something that I get like a fair amount of messages about this kind of stuff. Just because obviously that's something I try on social media. But like, that's what I always say to people, like, is don't do it all at once. Like, I've done this because we started doing this when my daughter was 2, or I do this because, you know, we started it because this happened and I found it. But it's so beautiful, but like if you tried to do it all at once anyway, it would just feel so overwhelming, enjoyable. So now we've like layered it, and it's just grown and grown and grown. And that's what I always say to people, is don't try and do it all at once. It would be overwhelming and rubbish and not fun and stressful. And even now, like I find like at Yule, like we were all I mean like not the Yule, the celebration we did, but like when, you know, on the actual solstice, the longest night, like none of us were feeling amazing. We'd had like such a week of everyone having coughs and colds, and there were all these crafts I wanted to do, and I found myself getting really bound up and wound up about, oh my god, I haven't done this, and oh my god, it's nearly time to celebrate, and I haven't I made these stars and I hadn't hung them up, and I was like, we're gonna have dinner under the stars, and like I had to like stop myself and be like, what does it matter? Like, we don't need to do it. The kids don't care. They loved it. Like, and so it's just like what is enjoyable and what feels good, and like what is your season. Like, if you've just had a new baby, it's probably not the time to do all the things, right? Like as mothers, we have seasons, like not just the seasons, but seasons within ourselves. So.
Yeah, I think it's letting go of that perfection, and I think in a world that's very geared towards instant gratification these days, it's very easy to feel like you need to do things perfectly right off the bat and do it all and have it just be instantly a part of your your family's rituals and rhythms. But it's definitely not helpful, and it doesn't lend itself to longevity, because if you try to cram everything in all at once, then it's not embodied and it's not intentional, and it's not like your kids are going to go, oh, I remember exactly how to do this, because if it's rushed and it's scrambled and you're fitting too many things in, it's just another craft. So I think, as you said, like over time, year by year, adding little things, trying something new, maybe letting go of something that nobody liked, or that is too much work, and finding an alternative that maybe is a little bit simpler, something that, you know, you don't have to order products for, or, you know, ingredients for, or what have you. Just find something that you can do around you. And I've done a couple of episodes talking about Wheel of the Year with kids. And one of my previous guests, Holly Moffat, she has a great approach, and her daughter's a little older now, but she's been doing these kinds of things with her since she was a baby. And she has a binder, but granted, she's type A. I'm type B, verging on type C. So depends on the day. And so I am not as structured, and I don't really, much to my mother's dismay, I don't really believe in a lot of structure. I do in some regard, Capricorn, but also I like my kind of more spiritual craft related things to be a bit more fluid and intuitive. And so you know, I don't put a lot of pressure on myself to make things happen. I try, but then I'm not going to feel bad about it if I don't get to it. I just have to surrender and go, you know what? It wasn't meant to happen. I don't have capacity right now, and that's okay. And I'm a big fan of a candle, because I feel like no matter what you do or don't do, you can always just light a candle, and it's always special and nice. And you can, you know, anoint it if you want, or don't, or whisper it in intention, or don't. But the candle, regardless, is just a very easy, nice way to mark an occasion. And so sometimes I'll let Finn pick a candle, or like he'll pick a candle to have while he's having a bath. And that's really nice for him. And, you know, I accidentally taught him about ritual bathing. It was not intentional. But I was shooting some photos for the Botanical Anthology magazine, and I was making a lemon balm ritual bath, and he watched me do it, and I didn't realize that he was absorbing it all. And then I was making Tulsi elixir, which he helped me with. And then he was taking all the sticks and all the extra leaves that I wasn't using, and I was like, where is he going? And he was throwing them in the bath because he wanted to have a ritual bath. And I mean, that's just so easy. Like, he helped me pick them in the first place. Like, that's such an easy thing to make like an occasion special, is just to pick some things from the yard, like some herbs that you're growing, you know, or something left over from a meal that you didn't use, and let the kids like throw it in the bath, and, you know, add some butterfly pea powder if you want, or whatever it is, you know, add some rose petals and light a candle, and like, what a special bath experience for them too. So I think like it just does not have to be complicated, and, you know, we don't have to live up to the standards that social media sets for what it needs to look like at all. It can really just be what feels nice and is within you have the spoons for. I would love to know, just, are there any other little things? Like, one thing I really like to do is tea. I like to, you know, seasonal teas are really nice to include as a part of a seasonal celebration. But are there any things that you guys do that are really simple, you know, kind of things that fit into your life naturally that have come about?
That's a good one. What do you do? Baking's like,
if you have a garden.
So we have our garden, and obviously like that's a seasonal thing, but also an interesting one, just the fact that things grow all year. All the flowers that are still going in the middle of winter. And so yeah, we obviously are out. We're out there a lot. And then we do a lot of, like, my daughter's very into like witchy sort of medicine making. And so whatever's going on out there, it's just so nice to bring it inside and do things with it. Making like syrups, and she really loves making oxymels. So whatever's going on in the garden, like, gets
fun.
Honey and some vinegar. And then in terms of like little things that we've kind of grown, I guess, like along, well, baking's our big thing. I know you mentioned that earlier. It's just so easy to make it seasonal. There are just things. Like we have a couple of books on like apple cake, so we always bake an apple cake every autumn. And just it's something that's so easy, and then that you return to as well. That's what I love the most about our books, but also these little like rituals that become part of your life is you get to like greet them like old friends like every year, and when you've like put the books away or whatever, and then you don't see them for 9 months, and they come back out, and it's like just such a the kids get excited to see them, but like for you as a mother, it's such like a flood of like nostalgia and emotions, and like especially the things and the books and all those things that I've been doing now for like 8, you know, my daughter's turning 9 this year, but like for 8 years, you know. And the ones that we used to bring out in England and all those things, like it's just so beautiful to have them. Imagine them one day, you know, adults passing them down and all those things. But yeah, the baking is the big one for us. Yeah,
I think baking is such a fun one for kids too, because like whether or not they help you, which is like a fun thing in itself, chaotic but fun. Expect to wear the flour, but I think, you know, it's just like, it's a treaty. It's like a fun thing. They get to eat it afterwards, and that's so exciting. And it's something, it's like that sensory remembering every year where they get to go, oh, I remember what this tastes like. I remember what this looks like or smells like. And, you know, that's a part of that embodied experience of like living seasonally in a very genuine way, is being able to not only see, smell, experience, touch the things that are going on outside in nature by collecting pine cones or, you know, picking dandelions or whatever that looks like for you. But then also, you know, inside the house, you get to taste the baked goods, and like a Yule log cake is on my list. I want to do that. I haven't done that yet. But that is definitely on my list. But Finn always just loves cracking into something that I've baked. So that's really nice. And then the book thing is lovely, and that's another thing you don't have to do all at once, right? Like that's something you collect a book or 2 each year, because there's 8 Sabbats on the wheel, right? And so that's a lot of holidays. And so, you know, like obviously I think it tends to go, even though there's 8 Sabbats, you kind of have like summer, autumn, winter, spring anyway in terms of books. But yeah, like collecting those over time, there's nothing that gives me a thrill like finding one of the books that's been on my list in like an op shop, like a thrift shop. That is just one of my favorite things. Especially because I'm not paying $30-40+ for it. That's always nice. But one other thing I brought down is this thing, which people comment on all the time, because it sits on one of my main altars, and this is a Southern Hemisphere Wheel of the Year carving. So this we love, and this is something that even my husband enjoys, and he always makes sure that the Sabbath that we're on is facing up. He goes, oh, you haven't moved it yet, and he'll flip it around. Don't know that that's really necessary, but he gets jollies from it, so I let him have that. And so I really do enjoy having this around, and people always ask me where I got it, and I got it from a market locally, and I spoke to the guy this morning, and he still doesn't have an online store. So you can always come to one of the Tambourine Mountain markets, and he is usually there. But he also now does an Indigenous Wheel of the Year, which is really interesting as well. And they're becoming more popular. So I've had people ask me about those as well. Have I ever worked with them? And no, I haven't. My practice tends to be Celtic, which I feel like yours is probably like Irish Celtic. Yours is probably similar. But yeah, so having like things that you can put out, you know, that remind you, that you can look at through the year and kind of point out where we're at. There's lots of different ones on Etsy, but I really love having that kind of visual representation. So that's really fun as well. And altar building, of course. Like building an altar together is just such a joy.
Yes, exactly. And adding things, and I love how it feels. By the end of the season, it's like so cool of like all the little things you've made. And you get to clear it off and start again. It's so special. So nice.
Yes, as a person who I feel like is busy, which is a word I'm trying to distance myself from, like a busy person. I've always got a million things on. That was like, that's always been the one mainstay for me going through the year has been, and these days it happens not like as quickly, but was always just resetting my altar, and that was my main devotional practice, and I always enjoyed that. And I used to have like artworks I would swap out for each Sabbath, and like that's just such a simple way. Like I would put bits from nature and like different colored candles, and maybe I would switch out my candle holders for something that was like the colors of the season, and like, you know, I'd swap out little like statuettes of like bunnies, or, you know, for something that's more like a crow for Samhain or whatever. You know, so that has always been just, if that's all you do, then that's fine too. Like it doesn't have to be a big thing. So,
and children are such natural collectors. Like they love a collection. It's such an easy way to like invite them into your practice.
We have some stones that Finn brought back from Canada, and now that's on our altar, as because I have like shells from my grandmother and things from my family, but he doesn't really have anything from my husband's side. So we have some lake rocks we picked up on the beach and from my husband's hometown where his family live. And now we've got that on the altar, and that was really fun for him to see. And sometimes he'll pick them up and like put them in water so that the colors come out, and like that's just such a natural part of it, and really, yeah, like that's his stamp. So yeah, I like that. That is all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed listening to Abby and I chat about the Wheel of the Year, seasonal living, integrating rhythms and rituals and a nature-based practice into family life, and having these practices be something you can do with your kids, and something that can just integrate really seamlessly into your life in low effort ways that can bring a lot of joy and connection to the seasons and the world around you. And yeah, Solstice is always really inspiring. I love watching her share about that on her Instagram. So as usual, I'll pop all of her links and everything that we talked about in the show notes, so you can go and check it out. You can follow some links, maybe get some of these books for yourself. And I would love to know if you have any feedback for us, if you tried anything that we spoke about, if anything resonated with you. Let me know, you know, in the comments on Substack, or tag us on Instagram. We'd love to see who's listened to the episode. And I hope that you guys really enjoy the rest of the season. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Your support means the world to me, and if you have a free moment and would like to leave a review, a comment, or a rating on your platform of choice, that would go a long way towards helping me to grow the podcast and reach more people. If you aren't already subscribed, check out my Substack newsletter. Over there, I share lots of free resources, as well as an option to join as a paid subscriber, which is another beautiful way you can support my work. May what you've heard today guide you in living a little more slowly and a little more connected.